Good evening. With a big question here on NDTV Profit. I'm Vikram Oza, and tonight we're asking a big question. It's about power, it's about peace and the future of the global order. The American President Donald Trump, he's unveiled what he calls a new Board of Peace. It's a US-led international body which is meant to stabilize Gaza after that ceasefire. And invitations have gone out. They've gone out to India and dozens of other countries, and that includes Russia. Membership, though, comes at a price. What's the price? $1 billion. To stay on the board, you need to cough up $1 billion. Now, this board would be chaired by President Trump himself, and it would be guided by a powerful executive group that includes Marco Rubio, Tony Blair, Jared Kushner, Ajay Banga, and others. So with Palestinian technocrats running day-to-day administration on the ground, this is the kind of structure that Trump has envisaged. So supporters are calling it decisive. Critics are saying this as an entire parallel mechanism which bypasses the United Nations. Does it? Decades of collective peace building done by the United Nations, is that making way for the Board of Peace? And this isn't happening in isolation. Now look at what's happening. At the same time as we're talking about the Board of Peace, the Trump administration has slapped 10% tariffs on 8 European countries, raising them to 25% by June. And this would stand unless Europe backs that plan. Washington's position on Greenland, they need backing from Europe, and now this is the condition. 25% tariffs. The tariffs include the United Kingdom and France and Germany and the Nordics. European leaders are already warning of a threat to the very unity of NATO, the Arctic security as well, and the transatlantic relationship as it stood. So here's the bigger picture. Is America now signaling that power, pressure, and leverage matter more than consensus? Are tariffs now becoming a tool of diplomacy? And the real question now for India as well is, where does it leave India in this entire debate while a Board of Peace is getting discussed in this new kind of world order where we're talking about deals, we're talking about leverage against, collective wisdom or collective action when it comes to anything that's happening in the world? It's a real departure from what we have seen over the years. How is India going to maneuver its way through this new world order? That's the kind of question that we've raised tonight, even as we talk about Trump's Board of Peace versus UN. Can American power replace collective action, is the question that we're asking. And to be able to take that on and debate this, let me introduce you to our panel tonight. Let's bring them in. Tonight on the show, Shashank is joining us. He's former diplomat and Foreign Secretary of India. Also with him, Jayant Krishna, trade expert and senior fellow, Center for Strategic and International Studies. Vivek Mishra is also with us. He is Deputy Director, Strategic Studies Program at the Observer Research Foundation. And we have Shantanu Singh with us as well. He's an international law expert. Great to have you, gentlemen. Glad you could make the time. Shashank, let me begin by asking you, now that President Trump is proposing this US-led Board of Peace, even as the United Nations remains quite sidelined in Gaza, and that's not just about Gaza. In the recent past, we've seen it getting sidelined from a diplomatic, from an institutional standpoint. Do you think this stands for pragmatic leadership, or do you think it's a dangerous kind of erosion of the kind of multilateral system that we've had, that India has also historically supported?
Yeah, from your introduction itself, it seems that the United Nations has failed in Gaza. It has failed the Palestinians. It has failed all the other international issues. And we have seen for the last 20, 25 years, a plurilateral approach or unilateral approach. And now we are seeing that the kind of plurilateral approach which was being mounted by, let's say, the NATO countries for out-of-area action programs, they have also become very frail. So I think we are reaching a new situation, and therefore, perhaps we should really put on our thinking caps and see how best we can work out a proper process for peace in the region, especially in Gaza. India has generally taken the view that we would join the international forces if they are under the UN auspices, because we did not see us as being part of the plurilateral processes mounted by the Western countries, or even by unilateral actions by different countries. And we tried to avoid our direct participation by saying that we want only peace, prosperity, and development for the people. So ours has been a people-centered approach. And the reason is that we have a large population in our country. We are coming from a background where we were a colonialized country till 1947. After that, we have been able to overcome the initial burden of a newly independent country. And now we are reaching a stage where we are willing to contribute our peace building capabilities as well as our economic growth potential with other partners. So I think we have to really think it over, and I would be happy to listen to others.
Yes.
But I would say that we should really check up everything properly, but we should not just simply say that either UN or nothing else.
Fair enough, at a larger level. But like you said, India is coming into its own when you're talking about growth, where our standing in the global order is concerned. Now is our time. And now is also the time when we're talking about a body which is apart from the United Nations, that the Trump administration, which does business first, does transactions before it actually talks about any kind of collective move. So it is a real departure. How India stands within that is going to be an important piece. And Krishna, what do you say? We are now seeing these tariffs, they're getting used. And it's not just for trade disputes, but it's now this kind of tariff culture is being used as a leverage on allies. And that includes Europe. It's about strategic issues. Greenland is a strategic issue right now. So is this simply the new grammar of global power where economic coercion becomes this normal diplomatic tool?
So Vikram, fortunately for us, this kind of economic coercion is confined to the US right now, using it, the high drama that they're playing. I mean, people who are not supportive of their move on Greenland, a higher tariff has been imposed on them, and it still goes higher beyond a few months, So that's a very unfortunate development that we see happening, emanating from the US. Not just for the European countries, but all over the world. The kind of tariff war and, a very, very hostile situation that we have seen from February of last year onwards, it's very, very unfortunate, But, coming back to your, the US-led intergovernmental organization, the Board of Peace, which has been formed, I think we should not dismiss it outrightly just because it's an attempt, to overshadow United Nations, which in any case has not delivered in many situations, including in Gaza. So I think if you go by the mandate, what their self-acquired mandate for this Board of Peace, they have talked about to promote stability, to restore dependable and lawful governance, to secure enduring peace, especially in areas which are already affected by the conflict or a potential conflict in the region. So I think, and if you look at the UN Security Council Resolution 2803, that's also largely in sync with this Board of Peace concept. So I would think, one should study more. India has been offered a position on the Board of Peace. It reached New Delhi 3 days back, and India is yet to decide on that. But let me tell you, I mean, earlier we have seen the failure of League of Nations, and then it was replaced by the UN, And now, I'm not saying it's going to replace UN, because UN is into n number of things, And here, largely, the mandate given by Trump to Board of Peace is very, very different, that to provide, government structure for Gaza, and Hamas would no longer have a role in its governance. And very clearly they have talked about that it is temporary, it is transitional, it is apolitical, and it is technocratic, right? And it will also look into, the funding of redevelopment of Gaza. So I think, yes, I mean, to your first question about trade, yes, it is very unfortunate that it's being used as a weapon by the US. But I think the world should not outrightly reject Board of Peace, and India also needs to evaluate a little more, because supporting it does not mean that you are de-supporting the UN.
So this isn't outright outside the spirit of the United Nations. Vivek Mishra, would you agree with that point of view that is being offered? That if you look historically, though, the UN has played only a very marginal role in conflicts like Kosovo or Iraq or even Syria, now even Gaza. So given that record, now one wonders whether they talk about the specificity of this entire setup that we are talking about, a board of peace, is that going to be a temporary phenomenon, or do you think that a UN can be replaced?
Yeah, with everything that is happening around us, I think we've come at a point where we are writing probably the final words of the post-Second World War, orders obituary. So I think from that perspective, we do have the United Nations. There's an understanding that the body as a whole has a historical record of dysfunction, particularly in areas that where conflict is related, and in its dealing with powers, great powers, particularly the United States. So there's been that dysfunction in the UN's inherent character, and therefore this opportunity, the Board of Peace, I think it comes both as an opportunity and a risk. Opportunity because you're a rising power for India, particularly you're a rising power. Here's an olive branch that Sergio Gore, the ambassador, is here. He's extending on behalf of Donald Trump. It could be an opportunity for you to step up in the region. Plus, the Middle East is coming up potentially as a technology hub on which your supply chains is going to depend and link the Indo-Pacific region, and that is linked to the changing character of the Indo-Pacific itself, where a lot of technology, second order and third order impact will be felt here.
Yes.
And a risk because the Donald Trump administration is going to stay for 3 years and for two reasons. One is you don't know what will happen tomorrow with a presidency like Donald Trump. The second is the Middle East remains a tinderbox. It is there is a war looming every day in the Middle East. Where the peace and stability question goes from here is I don't think much under control of Donald Trump, even with the power that the United States demands today.
Correct. So in that kind of situation, when you have the possibility, as of now, when we are talking about how the entire country is getting these tariffs almost slapped onto them, acceptance is there, pressure is there, parallel institutions, as far as we are seeing it now, are being accepted as the new normal. So then what happens to smaller and middle powers like India in a time like this? Shantanu Singh, what does international law say? Because here one argument is that, look, in a letter perhaps we are not kind of digressing too much from the possibility of having a body of this kind, a board of peace. But in spirit at least, are we moving radically away?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show. What I will point out, and I'm thankful to the ambassador who touched upon it, is that the UN Board of Peace that has been proposed by the US, its charter was recently made public. And we knew since the UN Security Council resolution that this is a body which has been given a small mandate, a thin mandate to operate in Gaza as the situation improves. But the charter, which has come out on 15th of January, it tells a very different story. This is a body which has been given a very general sort of mandate. And if you pass through the charter's language, what you realize is that the chairman of the board, President Trump has been given a number of veto authorities. And even the membership is a very interesting case to study, because it mimics the model of the UN Security Council in that there are members who are non-permanent, and then by paying $1 billion to the cash only to the fund of the board, you can become a permanent member. So again, it's a question for countries like India to ask themselves, what is the kind of governance model for the world that we want to support? Because the charter of the UN, in opposition to the Board of Peace, is one that is driven by consensus and is undergirded by sovereign equality, territorial integrity of states.
Yes.
How the board will respond to that is something countries have to consider, and I think that is how they would respond.
So Shantanu, at a time that we're talking about this Board of Peace, we are seeing these tariffs by the same person who would like to chair this board is talking about tariffs, and he's using them. And now it's over European allies on the issue of Greenland. Don't you think that blurs the line between trade law and a kind of coercive diplomacy under the WTO principles, the customary international law? Where does economic pressure end and where does illegal coercion begin?
That's a very interesting question, because up until the creation of WTO law, we still understood tariffs and trade embargoes to be something that operates in the general body of international law. Now, with regard to tariffs, of course, the first question we ask is, is this legal under the WTO's infrastructure? There's a good case to be made that many and almost most of these tariffs are illegal. But what we are seeing, and we sort of had an idea before this system even took place, the reciprocal tariffs that I'm speaking of, is that these economic tools of the US, in addition to sanctions, are being used to coerce states. And this is completely something that is prohibited under the UN Charter. So again, a remaking of the world where the political independence, their sovereignty with regard to external and internal decision-making is being taken away through the use of economic might, be it in the form of sanctions, which have lasted quite long, and the tariffs which have come up since about April last year. So it's a remaking of the world, and the tool that is quite being used in the first place is economic. What I will say is that tariffs only affect goods trade.
Yes.
So that's something that we have to be very mindful of.
Sure.
US companies and services and intellectual property rights continue to be protected under rules that are international.
Right.
So how much is this a question of international law sort of breaking down to an extent where tariffs are being used to coerce states?
And perhaps Jayant Krishna is warning against a reading which is an overarching kind of change from the current world order. Don't you agree, Jayant Krishna? Isn't that what you're hinting at? Though Europe is currently warning that Trump's tariff threats could risk a breakdown of NATO unity. So there could be fallouts because of this. It's a dangerous downward spiral, they call it, in relations within NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So even if allies are fair game, do you think this marks the end of this kind of alliance-based trade, at least? Would you concede that? And also the security of the region altogether, isn't that kind of being brought to question if you're going to use this kind of coercive diplomacy?
Yeah, so, I mean, there was never any love lost between President Trump and NATO right from the beginning. It was very, very clear. And through a variety of, coercive measures, including those related with the tariff, he's clearly trying to create a divide amongst NATO nations, right? It's a very, very unfortunate. And as far as India is concerned, it has faced the worst with the 50% tariff, but India is diversifying its trade big time. I mean, what NATO, how it handles it, it's totally their call. It's their country, their group of countries, their trade with the US, and it's their call. But as far as India is concerned, it has understood that it will be a big folly to keep laying all eggs in the American basket, and therefore it's diversifying its trade. We have a FTA with the UK, with UAE, with Australia, and the one with the European Union is around the corner. In all probability, it will get signed on 27th of this month, right? So I think, and there are about 12 to 14 countries with whom India has a trade deal which has been done in last couple of years. So I think India has to diversify its trade big time.
Yes.
And every country has every right to see what is in the best economic interest of it. Yes. And I'm sure India will face it.
Yes, but does it compromise collective action when it comes to situations like we have a Russia-Ukraine situation right now? If it's all going to be transactional, Shashank, India, of course, has been invited to join this Board of Peace. It's happening at a time when the UN Security Council remains paralyzed on Gaza. So when you talk about India, does it risk being seen as endorsing what could be seen as a parallel system to the United Nations? Or do you think staying out of it is a bigger risk? And we perhaps, the kind of relevance that we need right now in the world, in decisions that affect the region, that we may be left out of it, and so we cannot risk that from happening. What do you think?
Well, I would consider that our priority should be peace in Gaza and welfare of the people living in Gaza. Therefore, we should be quite prepared to pay $1 billion for the welfare of the Gaza peace. And we can say that, well, we'll see over a period of time how we take part in the board, how we contribute to the assistance programs for Gaza, because we have a lot of experience in peacekeeping and sending medical teams and sending other kind of materials which can be of great help to other countries. In Afghanistan, we have spent several $billion to bring about welfare of the people there. So we can do that for Gaza also. Second part, I agree with the other panelists that it is really the NATO call or the call of the Europeans to decide how they want to deal with the situation, because they have known it for a fairly long time that President Trump would go for acquiring Greenland. There could be two reasons. One is he said that it's a security ground.
Yes.
The second, he says that, well, he thinks that perhaps the midterm elections on USA are not necessary, and he feels that maybe something should be done about that.
Yes.
So I think if you have an emergency kind of a situation within NATO, among the NATO countries, then I think that helps President Trump on both sides. And
Yes,
he has also been saying, yes, please.
Yes, but now the question is, where should India prioritize? At a time like this, should we concentrate on building resilience at home? Vivek Mishra, to you. Or do you think we should have more diversification abroad, which is being offered as a solution? It's something that we are working towards, that kind of diversification when it comes to trade and our future strategic interests. Or do you think there should be deeper alignment with like-minded partners? That's something that perhaps we try to do in the South Asian region, but I don't know how far we've gotten. So in your sense, what should be India's approach at a time like this, where economic leverage is really the calling card when it comes to that kind of power that America wields and is exercising?
So I do think that it has the approach that India has to take has to be a mix of all these and assessed on a case-to-case basis. For instance, if you talk about internal reforms, it's a must, and I think we've somewhat woken from the slumber in terms of the need for economic reforms, and some of the reforms that have been announced in the past few months have been critical to that. The second is in the partnership has to be calculated on a need-to-need basis. Your great power relations are at a certain vantage point and certain difficulties, and therefore you'll have to assess where you want to go with that. But in South Asia particularly, things are different. I mean, in South Asia, there are historical reasons and cultural reasons why we haven't been able to, bring the region together, particularly because of one country, and that is Pakistan. Now, the Board of Peace, for instance, also has Pakistan. The invitation has gone. One wonders whether they'll join and whether India will. But I think these are some of the difficulties where a practical assessment of the necessities and your greater role in the region, not just in Middle East, but I think broader global context has to be taken to arrive at these decisions.
But Jayant Krishna, I'll let you have the final thought on this, because now, do you think a world which is led by power and pressure becoming that much more decisive? Or do you think this is making our world more fragile in times to come in this kind of world order? And are we prepared for the kind of global order that is likely to follow after this?
Yeah, so Vikram, it's very unfortunate. I feel the world has become more fragile with the President Trump's, what he has been saying to make America great again, and only looking at American interests with an approach that to hell with the rest of the world. I think the world has surely become very fragile, and what he calls as the American interest, it may also not be fully aligned with American interests also, right? I mean, if he raises the tariff and if some of the tariff trade on the high tariff continues, then who suffers? For industrial goods, the American industry suffers because the cost of import is going, is going to be much higher, and the consumers for consumer products, right? So, and it will also have an effect. It's actually beginning to have some effect on the inflation in the US as well, right? So I think it's a very, very fragile. Every country has to decide its own strategy, but a time has come where a mere wait and watch will not work. I think we have to be very, very clear, and India has shown that yes, US could be the second largest trading partner for a nation like ours, or perhaps the largest FDI investor in India. But the fact is, we will not compromise, we will not succumb, and not compromise vis-a-vis the interest of farmers and dairy entrepreneurs and fishermen and so on and so forth. I think India has played that card very well. We have not retaliated. We have not used unparliamentary language. We have not resorted to reverting to President Trump on Twitter and other social media handles. But the fact is, we are very, very clear, we are resolute that we would do what is good for India and not succumb and not take it lying down.
Well, the clear takeaway for us from this discussion is quite clear that the old assumptions about how the world is governed, they are coming under strain. So if you look at everything that's happening from Gaza to Greenland, from tariffs to the kind of treaties that are being signed, power, pressure, and pragmatism, these are reshaping, as it were, global diplomacy as it stands. So whether it's going to make the world more secure or perhaps more volatile, we are living in a fragile world, like we heard. It's still an open question right now. For India, it's going to be a bigger challenge. It may not be choosing sides, but choosing when to deal, with whom to deal, where to resist, where not to resist, and when to defend the global order, as it were, the rules that were put down. That's going to be an important ask for India, and we'll be following that very closely. But that's where we're leaving it tonight. Our thanks to our panelists for joining us, Shashank, Jayant Krishna, Shantanu Singh, and Vivek Mishra. Thank you for joining us with your insights, and we look forward to more invigorating conversations. And of course, it's an important question. In fact, in Davos at the World Economic Forum 2026, this is the talk of the town about the kind of tariffs that the Trump administration is now levying on age-old allies in Europe. Now, how are things going to move even as this board of peace is getting discussed? It's a development that we're watching very closely, but for the moment, from all of us here, and me, Vikram Oza, thank you very much for joining us on The Big Question.